All right, so let's try to create a web app project using CLASP and bunch of other Node.js related tools. So I'm not going to cover every little detail about these tools. I did cover all of them one by one. I know watching the videos about those tools is not fun, but that's kind of fundamental about understanding what's happening here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically just go to my Google Drive. Let's just create some sort of app script project so that we can use it in CLASP. So I'm going to go ahead and right click here and go to more, Google App Script. Just name this something. In here, we need the doGet function. That should return some sort of HTML service. And we need some sort of HTML file, which will be this index file. That's pretty much it. I'm just going to basically publish this. And we're done. We have this. We have our dev link, which we can open, and that should basically get us up and running. All right, so now that we're done with this, let's go to our Visual Studio Code. Nothing happening here. I'm just going to create a folder on my computer and just drag it over here to get it up and running. So that's this folder. Now, the main thing we want to think about when we're dealing with a web app is what's our input going to be like and what's our output going to be like. Now, the output should be the way AppScript wants the output. So the output generally is we have some server-side code in this JS files, and then we have index.html that has all the HTML, and usually we'll put script and CSS as a part of this. And sometimes we use like include functions to separate those, but I'm not going to do any of that. So that's the output. We need some sort of HTML file, and we need some sort of JavaScript backend server file or files. So with that in mind, let's just go to our Visual Studio Code. And first of all, let's just create a folder here. And this is pretty much where all the output is gonna go. So all that HTML and script files that I was talking about. I'm gonna create another folder here. And this should not be inside of this folder, just on the same level. So this is gonna be where I'm gonna be creating all the server-side code. I'm gonna make another folder here. And that will be my client folder. This is where pretty much all the HTML, CSS, and that type of stuff is gonna go. So that's the way I'm gonna structure this. And I'm gonna open the terminal. So let's just initiate an npm project. So I do the -y to not have to answer all the questions, but that basically creates this package.json file. We also want to make sure we log into CLASP and basically just get everything we need to get. But before we do that, let's actually go back to our script and do a couple of things here. So what I'm doing here, I'm basically just adding a line for every service that I'm planning to use. So I can basically just run this and make sure that I give permission to do all these things so I don't have to worry about all the permissions. And as long as you put it in here, even if it's a command, it will ask for those permissions. So if I just go here and run this doGet function, see, that triggered all of those permissions. So I'm going to review this. And if you look here, it's asking for permission to do Google Drive files and also to connect to external service. And that's because of the URL fetch and the Drive app. So any other service I would be using here, I would just add right away, at least for those that I know, so that I don't have to worry about it. Let's also just set up the time zone. And we're going to need the script ID out of here. So at this point, I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to log into CLASP. Again, how to install CLASP, how to install Node.js, VS Code, all of that. I've done videos. Each one takes quite a bit to explain. So we are logged in. So now we want to clone that project to this app script folder. So clone that ID that I just did. And root directory is going to be that app script. So that creates this JSON file for our CLASP. And now if I go to app script, you'll see we have the manifest, the code file, and that index file. So for the most part, we don't want to be touching this. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to concentrate now on this client. In this client, I'm going to basically add some files, also folders. So I'll just go ahead and create a JS folder. And I'll also create a CSS folder. And I'll call it SCSS. And I'm going to move those to be inside of that client. See, one JS, one SCSS inside of that client. And inside of that client, I'm going to make an HTML file too. Now, you don't want to think like you have to structure everything exactly the same way. The main thing here is to understand different parts, and depending on what you're trying to do with your project, you can set this up the way you like it. So now in this JS folder, I'm going to do a JavaScript file and a Sass file in this one. And then in my HTML file right here, I'm going to just do some main HTML boilerplate. And I'm going to link to that JavaScript and Sass files. So that's the folder, that's the file name, and the script. And again, the folder and the file name. Should probably call that correctly. Let's just put an H1 in there. So let's just do some quick things here. I'm going to go to the Sass and create some background. I don't know, some CSS, it doesn't matter. And then we'll also write some JavaScript in our JavaScript file. Maybe we'll just change this. Something like this. So we should now have our index.html. We should have this. We should have this. We should also just install our CLASP definitions. So the same type of stuff we've done before. Now we should have hopefully autocomplete available to us. Now, the main thing here is that we need something that will take all of this input that we have, this HTML, this separate JavaScript, this Sass file, and convert it to one HTML file like this, because that's the way that AppScript wants to deal with this. So what we're going to do this is use Parcel. Now, by default, what Parcel is going to do is going to take this HTML and all different JavaScripts that you link in here and all different SAS files that you link inside of your SAS project and convert it to one HTML, one JavaScript, and one CSS file. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for one HTML with all the stuff in it. So for that reason, we're going to install this Parcel plugin that inlines everything in one file. And for that, we're going to run npm install Parcel plugin inliner, just like this. So now let's try to just run Parcel on this index.html file and see what we have. So for the time being, I'm just going to output this to, well, actually, let's just output it to default this directory for now, and then we'll change it. So for now, let's just do this. And by the way, this index file is not on the main level, so we have to go see we are in this client folder, and then we have this index.html. Let me actually add a couple of more flags here and run this as is to see what we get. So again, to understand what all these flags do, watch my Parcel videos. I'm not going to spend time on that here. So I'm just going to run this. Let's see what we get. Okay, so it had to go and grab some more stuff and install it, but it seems like we're good. Now let's look at our dist folder and see what's going on. So far, the same thing you would expect from regularly what Parcel would do. And that's because if I scroll up a little bit, see, we get an error message here. It says that the plugin failed to initialize this post HTML. So it's a dependency that doesn't exist. So let's try to install it. So let me rerun that same command, build our index file, and now check out my index file. See, it has a style directly in here. And if I keep scrolling down, it has all the JavaScript injected, including all the other Parcel stuff in the JavaScript, injected right here in our HTML file. And that's what I was doing. So to make sure you don't get confused because some of these files are created before, let's just delete this dist folder and rerun this. See, if I open this dist folder, so that's the type of thing that actually AppScript wants from us. It basically needs an HTML with all the JavaScript and CSS directly in the file, and we have it right now. So what's also nice about this is that if I go to that client file, and let's say we want to now include something like Bootstrap here, and we're just trying to link to their CDN. We're not trying to do our own Bootstrap, which might be a good idea too. But for right now, let's do the CDN. So that's their CSS. And that's their JavaScript, which we probably don't need, but I'm just doing this anyways. So now with this, if I rerun this and go check out the dist index, see those external links, they stay the same. It doesn't convert them to internal links. So it's only doing this with all the internal links we do in our project. But any of these links you do with HTTP, HTTPS, that's not going to be converted like this. So after this is done, I want this index.html to be moved to this AppScripts folder so we can actually use in our project, right? So to get that done, let's close all of these. And let's just create another script file here on our top level. So that's what I'm going to call this. I'm going to open this. And first, let's require our file system. And file system should allow us to do a bunch of stuff with our files. So for example, we can copy them. So I'm going to use this synchronous copy method. See, we can do the path of the source and then the path of the destination. And by default, destination is overwritten, which is fine. So our path for our file that we need to copy is going to be, I'm in this util, I'm in this main folder. So in that main folder, which is the current directory, I'm going to go to that dist folder. And from that dist folder, I'm going to go to index.html file. And I want to copy that to, again, in the current directory, I'm going to go to that app script folder. Like this. Now let's run this and see what happens. So this file is the one that's called util.js. And we can run it using node util.js. All right, so I forgot to do the destination file name. Let's save this. So again, app script and then the file name. We could actually rename the file too, but we're not going to do that. So save that. Let's try it again. So see, no errors this time. Let's go check our app script directory. If I open this index, see now this is that index that was in our dist directory. So now we have a way to basically just copy the file over from our dist directory to our app scripts directory. So the final part here is going to be to work on our server files. So the server files are going to be all the server-side files. So here, let's say we want to create some files in here similar to this code.js, which is probably one of the files we're going to create anyways. So let's do that. Let me just copy and paste this. Change this up a little bit so that we know it's different file. That should be plenty. Now we want to make sure all the other server files we create are located in here again. So if I make another one, now we can use ES6 now in our server side. So no reason to recompile or anything. We basically just need to copy all of these files to this app script directory and overwrite all the existing files. So I'm going to go back to our util.js thing. So what we want to do, we want to basically read this directory and copy all those files to this app script directory. So for now, let me comment this line that copies the other file so we can look at this. So let's just console log this output so you can see what we get here. So if I run this file, which is that util file, now it's going to run that. And see, we got basically the list of files in that directory. And it's returned as an array. So now because it's an array, we can loop through that array. And we need to just basically copy those files over. So those files are coming from that server folder. And we need to grab the right file here. So let me just change this to backticks. And now we can just put some variable here, which is the name of the file. So that's the file we need to copy from this server folder. And that needs to go to this app script folder under the same name. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We don't need to console log this. So now hopefully if I did this correctly, if I run this, we should see that in this app scripts folder, we should see all these files from the server folder copied over. So that's that node utils.js file. C is not defined. Of course it's not. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so no errors. Let's go check it out. So see, there's this ABCD and there's the code, and this is the new one. See, with all those changes. So I'm going to close this thing and go back to this utils. So this is where this is all happening. So we need that to also do this, which copies the index file. So I'm going to set some variables for this server and app script, all these directories. Now the final thing I'm going to do here, because I want this to be compatible with any environment, I'm going to include the path library here, which is one of the modules that's built in Node, similar to FS. So we don't need to install anything. So this path has this thing called resolve. And what it's going to accept is basically an array of things that it's going to use to create a path out of. So what that means that instead of doing, for example, this, I can do path resolve. And here I can pass an array, and basically it needs to be the current directory for this one and the server folder. So I'm going to do __ directory, comma, and then I'm going to follow that by this server. Just like this. Now, if this goes well, this should accomplish the same thing. Now, to test this, let's actually delete one of these files. And let's run the same thing. Okay, so it seems like this should not be an array. This should be probably a comma separated list. So that's done. Let's go check this out. See, that went to the right folder. So the advantage of using this path resolve is that this is going to figure out what is the right way to join all of this on Windows, what's the right way to join all of this on Mac, and we don't have to worry about this. So now I'm going to use the same technique for some of these other things. I'm going to take all of this and see how I have this current directory, server, and the name of the file. I'm going to get rid of this whole string thing and just add the F, which is the name of the file, to that whole thing. And I'm going to do that same over here. So again, the last one is the file, and we need the final directory in this case. Save this. As usual, let's test this too. I'm going to delete the file from this directory so we can check and verify if this works. I'm going to run this, and you can see that it copied the file over as it should. Now we need to do the same thing with these two, and then we should be done. So this one is the app scripts directory, which should be similar to this one. So let's just copy paste this. The only difference is instead of this F, we're going to use this HTML file. Another parentheses here, and I need to do that for this dist. And this one is going to be the dist directory. Okay, I think that does this. So this console log, you could do something like done copying, but this is now all set. Now let's just try to run this to make sure it works with no errors. Fine. So now we have a file that when we run this, it copies all the files over. It copies the HTML file, which is this index. It also copies all the server-side files to this app script directory. So we got all of that working. Now the way this is supposed to work, let's actually add a semicolon here just to be consistent. The way this is going to work, if I go here in client directory and make some changes to this HTML or this JavaScript or SAS files, I want right after the change to basically just run that parcel command to generate that index file right here. And after that, I want to copy all the files over to this AppScript directory. And once it's in this AppScript directory, then we need to push all those files to update in CLASP. So we need basically 3 commands to run in sequence. So let's just figure out what those commands are. So one of those was, for example, this one. So I'm just going to go to my package.json file. And here I'm just going to replace this test with this. Let's just call it like that. So that's the first thing we need to run. After this is done running, then we need to copy the files. And the way we copy the files is by running that node utils.js command. So after this is done, I'm going to do $& and I'm going to say run this one, node utils. That's the second command I want to run. So let's try this and see what happens. So we can run this by using this bld now command. For testing this, let me close some of this stuff because too many things open. So I'm going to go to this client. We have this file. So let's say I've decided I'm going to make some changes to this JavaScript or CSS or whatever. Here, let's say we're going to change this to green. So once I save this, now I need to basically run all of those commands. So let's do that npm run and whatever I called it. So it seems like I've missed something in this command. Oh, of course. Parcel. Let's do that. Change this. Parcel build, not just build. npm run bld again. So no errors this time. So let's go check out what happened in our AppScript folder. So if I go to AppScript, open that index.html, see the color is green, which is the update I was doing here. Which means now we can also run the third command after that to actually push those files to the server on Google server. And that's where we do CLASP push. So I'm going to go back to that package.json, and after the second command, I'm going to do $& again. So after that, I'm going to do CLASP push. So save this. So with this, now if I go to this client folder, I can go here and let's just change something here. Now if I run that npm command, that should do all those things and it should push all the files to the server. See, all those changes are now here. So we basically bundled everything. So if I just refresh this, see, this is that code.js, this is this, and this is this. With everything in one HTML file. Now we can go here and do SAS stuff, right? We can go here, declare a variable, and then use that color in here. So now we can use that with all kind of SAS functionality in here. And then if I run that, it's again going to do the thing and push all the files. So now if I go back and reopen this, we have that, all the changes I just did. Now finally, if you want this to happen on save without me having to go and manually run this command, this is where we can use Nodemon to automate this process. So I already created everything to just basically copy all the files over. Now I have to tell just Nodemon to do this when I make changes to certain files. And the files I'll be watching for are the files in this basically client folder and the files in this server folder. I already have Nodemon installed. I don't have to install it. And again, I have tutorials covering Nodemon if you want to watch those to understand what's going on here. I'm going to use watch flag first to watch that client directory. And then I'm going to do another watch flag to also watch that server directory. And when changes happen to any of those, I would like to run that command that I just built, npm run bld. And for that, we're going to use the execute flag. And in quotations, we're going to pass, that's not the right command, that npm command. We probably also want to specify the file types that we should be watching for. So we have JS files, JavaScript files here. And in here, we have JS, S, CSS, and HTML. And for that, we're going to do extension flag, ext, and basically just a comma-separated list of extensions. So JS, HTML, SCSS. I'll throw in CSS in there too, just in case we decide to add one. And I think that covers all of them. So if I run this, see, it's watching now for my changes. So let's say I've decided to make some changes. Let's say instead of purple, we're going to change this color. And it doesn't really matter what I'm changing, right? It could be in here. It could be in one of these other files. I'll just do it here. So we'll change this main color to blue, which will also change the background color to lighter blue or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and do Command S or Control S. And as soon as I do that, see, that will push all those changes. And if I go back and just reload this thing, now we have our blue. And apparently the blue background of percentage that I did lighter didn't work as a good color. I'm just curious what it converted that to. Let's just check that out. So that's white. Apparently we needed less lighter color from the blue for that to work. All right, so let's do like 30%. So there we go. Now we have the blue and we have the lighter, whatever that color is from SAS. Anyways, it works, it updates. Now I can go back and make changes to any of the other files. So let's say we'd like to make changes to this ABCD file. So again, as soon as I save it, it's going to push it. And if I go back and just check it out, see, we have the by now in our project. And if I go here and add another script file to the server, it's a JS file. So once I do that, that should push it. And if I refresh this, you should see now that file is also in here. So we're copying all of that to the appropriate folder, all of that. Now we just have, see, the final output, which is the way AppScript needs it. We can also use ES6 in our front-end client side now, because Babel that's included in Parcel is automatically going to convert it to whatever it needs to be. So here I could do let, const, all of that stuff, arrow functions. And finally, you could add one more step to this whole thing to actually open up the link after the whole thing is done. Now, if I'm working on a Mac, let me just exit out of this. Control C should do that. The final command I did was this one. Let me just copy this. Go back to my package.json. So this was that command. Now let's do comma and do another line here. And I'm just going to paste it right in here. And because now we're in this, see, we have a quotation, we have another quotation. We need to basically escape some of these with this slash, something like this, npm run this new, let's change this, that. And that should basically run the other one, and it should do whatever it's supposed to do, so I don't have to remember this crazy long command. Now it's doing what it's supposed to do. I'm going to do Control-C again to get out of it. Now the last part is the opening. So I want to, after I hit save, to do whatever it does. And let's say we want to just open the dev link automatically. Now, if I was just doing this on a Mac, I would at this point just grab this link. And on a Mac, on a terminal, the way you can basically trigger a link to be opened in your browser, you can just basically go in here and type open and paste that link. And if I hit enter, that should open that link in my browser. And as you can see, it did. So if I'm just doing this on my Mac, I would just basically just go here, and after this whole thing is done, so this was my command to also push it to CLASP. And then after it pushes it to CLASP, I could do $& again, and then say open this link. Now on Windows, there's probably another command that opens the link, and on a Linux, there's going to be another one. Now there should be a library that we can use to just make it compatible with all of them. But for now, let's just try to run this to see what it looks like. So now if I save this and just go back and make some changes, let's make sure we run the watch command, npm run watch, which is what I set it up to be. So now let's go and change this. Save it. And after it's done, see, it will also open the dev link right after save. And if you're interested, we can add some functionality to make this compatible with all systems. Or you can just look up what the Windows command is in the terminal instead of open. Now for me, I'm just going to go back and remove that command because I tend to save a lot. And I don't want to trigger that open every single time it does that. So I'll just remove this out of here. Control-C to get out of this. If you learn all these different pieces, like how Parcel works, how Nodemon works, how to copy files if you have to using Node.js, then you can customize your workflow to be the way you actually want it for the project, the way you like it. And hopefully this gives you overall overview what are some things that you could do. And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.